without further ado, I welcome you all to Why Trusted Spaces are Required for Impactful Research with Lena Blackstock.
All right. Hi, everybody. And thank you so much, Jane. That was a lovely introduction. I'm Lena. It's really nice to see everyone. I'm really excited to spend the day together at this inaugural People Who Do Research event, which is so fun. I'm going to be talking a little bit about creating and nurturing shared learning spaces. I think most of us here can agree on the what and the why for involving others in our research process. We all want to create impactful research. And I think my animations aren't working fully today, so I had some dramatic progressions planned, but we'll go with it. So impactful research drives evidence-based decisions within an organization. Impactful research is when research helps increase the confidence in our bets and reduces the risk to the business. And then importantly, impactful research results in an improved experience for the user. I firmly believe that learning mindsets, trusted relationships, and collaboration, especially cross-functional collaboration, are the foundation for that. But how we actually foster those environments is something we don't talk about often enough, and that's what I want to focus on today. So there are challenges I've observed in organizations related to collaboration. Often there's a disconnect between those doing the research or collecting the evidence and teams applying those learnings to the decision-making process. I also often see an expectation to work in cross-functional teams, but usually those interactions are solely centered around exchanging information instead of building shared knowledge and learning together. And most of the time, collaboration is something that's expected by the organization, and it's often talked about by leadership as a goal, but often it's not something teams are given time, resources to do sustainably, nor is it something that's incentivized. Oh, I was going to go back one. So I want to share some principles for effective cross-functional collaboration, and I'll also reflect on some learnings from my work in different organizations, trying to bring what I've been calling shared learning spaces to bear. Often for teams doing the research, it feels like you end up just throwing the findings over the wall to the teams needing the insights, fingers crossed, hoping they'll be able to apply them. I'm sure many of you know that feeling as a researcher when you go out and you do great research and then you share what you learned and then crickets, nothing happens. Often for teams doing the research, it feels like, oh, sorry, my slides are stuck with my animation. Instead, I think we can find ways to bring our partners along for the journey or to provide the tools and skills when they inevitably travel solo for parts or all of their journeys. Because in the end, I believe that the journey is the destination. Instead, I think we can find ways to bring our, before we get into the how of collaboration, sorry, my slides are all wonky with the animations. Before we get into the how of collaboration, let me briefly talk about what I mean when I say shared learning spaces. I'll be talking a bit more about all these concepts in a minute, but at a high level, I think about this in 3 layers. It all starts with the individual, each one of us bringing humility and a learner's mindset to our work. Secondly, we need trusted relationships. And my friend and fellow traveler, Justin Threlkeld, talks about this as relationships are the wire that insights travel on, which I think is such a lovely way to think about it. And then lastly, we have to create containers for continued and shared learning to happen. We need rituals and intentional practices for collaboration. So shared learning spaces are basically a container for better collaboration. And as a research leader, I want to focus on holding space for researchers and people who do research together. I want to offer that safe, trusted space that enables connection, conversation, collaboration. And I'll admit, I haven't landed on the perfect term or language for this yet. But I'm thinking about learning environments or anything that goes into creating and nurturing a culture of learning. I'm thinking about what would be the equivalent of the commons of an organization. Maybe thinking about this as, again, container design, as an intentionally designing an environment and drawing boundaries around all that goes into it and what doesn't to enable and foster that kind of collaboration that we're talking about. So if any of you have ideas or have developed language around this, I'd love to hear about it and continue thinking through that together. For me, the best metaphor that I've found for my role as a research leader has been describing it akin to that of an innkeeper. An innkeeper facilitates environments that offer travelers a safe space to rest and recharge. They offer resources and guidance for the journey. They make space for shared stories. But most importantly, in hosting travelers from all walks of life, they're intentional about the little big moments that facilitate connection. They're masters in the art of hosting. And similar to an innkeeper, a researcher may offer advice. So for an innkeeper, I might tell you about that secret hike down by the lake that no tourist guide or the app will show you. Maybe I'll offer tools like a map of the area or useful information like local weather patterns. We'll create a common area where people can connect and talk about their worries and goals for the next stretch. Like, what do they need to learn next to move forward? The travelers themselves may have different destinations, different reasons for the journey. There are researchers, people who do research, and people who need research. Some are trying to get from point A to point B, and then some are making the journey out of necessity, while others are traveling for pleasure. So when we look at the role of an innkeeper and put that next to the idea of the journey as a destination, we can start to see that the mission of a sustainable research practice should not be solely in supporting individual research activities, like creating a research report or partners participating in the research sessions, or even a well-run activation session with your peers. I love the concept of the journey as the destination, because when we look at it through that lens, we can see that we may best support our partners and further our goals by supporting them with tools and mindsets that help them make evidence-based decisions along the entire journey. And so these journeys will vary and look really different depending on the journey and the traveler's needs and goals, their experience, their background. So we may host them at the inn as a point of connection sharing. We may accompany them as guides, or we may support them on their own journey by sharing maps, tools, and knowledge. So all that is well and good and maybe easier said than done, right? So let's talk about the how. What are ways that we can create and nurture those environments? I believe our work is impactful when it supports decision-making at all levels of an organization. And usually as researchers, when we guide or inform decision-making processes, we can guide them, but we don't own them, or we don't own that responsibility, right? We rely on other teams acting on our insights, or better yet, we rely on collaboration. So that's where we can start to create opportunities or containers for building shared understanding, and that'll help us guide or affect that those decision-making patterns. There are activities and approaches at the individual and team level we can use to create these shared spaces. So let's talk about them. At the individual level, it starts with a learner's mindset. I think self-awareness and humility, the willingness and awareness to being wrong, sits at the core of productive collaboration and sincere partnerships. When we're willing to be wrong and we share those still forming, not yet fully shaped and polished thoughts and ideas in front of others, we build trust. And that requires vulnerability, humility, and bravery. When we do this, we also lead by example, hopefully encouraging others to be more vulnerable and brave to share not yet fully fleshed out thoughts, ideas, or solutions, which then in turn opens up and expands that space for shared learning. Bezos Siriani talks about the values of being researchers versus just doing research. And that's where we lean into our existing skills as researchers, such as facilitation, active listening, rapport building, right? Our goal is to enable learning with our teams instead of learning in isolation and then simply sharing, teaching, communicating out our findings. The value is in that shared learning process and that journey and how we shape and evolve and grow all that together. So again, that's where skills many of us already possess come in very handy. Rob Cross talks about some tactics of what he calls the connectors in his book, Collaboration Overload. And he says that connectors see realistic possibilities to connect with what others care about. It's not that they're positioning ideas in a way that's just good for them or that it's so extreme that it doesn't connect with what others care about, but they have systematic one-on-one interactions with about 50% or more of the time being off task. They're exploring those people's interests or aspirations. And that's the human connection. That's the relationship building based on trust and respect. And to me, when we couple that with strategic research work, we build connective tissue in an organization. I've called that the glue work. Cross also shares in an interview that what he learned through his research is that the more successful connectors tend to spend about 20 to 25% more of their time exploring possibilities with others and saying, how could we work together from different functions, different capabilities, different geographies? He adds that it's not someone tapping some invisible power structure, they're seeding relationships and developing an understanding of how they could work together better. And then lastly, protect your energy, i.e. don't burn out. We've all been there, or hopefully haven't been there, but it happens. So these challenges that come with managing additional time and energy that relationship building and collaboration requires, that can lead to collaboration overload, especially like when we talked about it's expected, but it's not supported. So it's important to manage your bandwidth and to consider your energy levels. Rob Cross found in his research that people who are successful at dealing with the extra time and energy needed to do this kind of work sustainably are putting structures into their calendar that's putting energizing interactions after de-energizing ones. So managing your bandwidth, not just your time, as much as you can is important. As an example, I'm quite introverted, and so some of you may be energized after guiding a large group through a collaborative framing session, while some of you, like me, even if you might be super skilled at this, you may feel drained after that session. So just taking time to reflect on how you feel and being intentional about how and when you spend your energy. There are also activities and approaches we can bring in on the team level. So the first piece here is to focus on one-on-one relationships, that relationship building and paying extra attention to creating space for informed intuition. So going back to what we talked about earlier, on an individual level, bringing humility and a learner's mindset in our work is crucial. But when we step into that shared space, when we aim to establish a relationship with someone, I found that coupling that with intentionally creating space for their informed intuition is huge. So the idea behind informed intuition is that our own lived experiences, our expertise, our mental models inevitably guide us in our world and in our work. And we have to be willing to see and leverage what we don't and can't know, including the knowledge and experience our peers and stakeholders bring with them, especially when those are outside of our realm of expertise or understanding. There's no such thing as objective, purely rational data or information, especially when we're talking about collective learning or co-designing something. And so as researchers, we know that all the choices we make are based on our point of view, and they're inevitably biased. So that includes the choices we make for framing, scoping, recruiting, timelines, research approach, reporting, but also how we communicate and collaborate, with whom, how, when, where. And so I have to be humble enough as a researcher to recognize those biases. And more importantly, I think we have to support those around us in doing the same. And so when we step back and accept that a team member is bringing deep perspectives based on their lived experience, it's important we make space for that and pay attention to it. For me, there have been times where, honestly, I would work with highly technical partners and I would feel super intimidated by their deep expertise and their knowledge. And so my instinct in that situation is to act maybe overly confident or boast about my own expertise, or maybe go deep on which research methodology we should apply and why to generate groundbreaking insights for them. But when I've been able to create space for their expertise and humbly listen to learn, it becomes less of an exchange or a competition of knowledge, and instead becomes that space for shared learning and building trust. I'll give you one more example here, because when it goes the other way and we don't do this, it can really blow up research projects. Those experiences, the informed intuition, they can actively work against you if you don't bring it into the process. And it's why establishing trust and building those relationships sits at the core of a democratized model. Because if we don't, suddenly you'll have a stakeholder with 20 years experience telling you your insights don't match what they've experienced. And maybe they're right, and you could have done better research if you'd started with their lived experience in mind. But regardless, now you're in a debate and you're trying to get them to trust your insights or defend your work. And then you can derail not just a project, but like a whole relationship. So again, that idea of relationships as the wires insights travel on sits at the core of what we do as researchers. The relationship has to come first, then the insights. And I think we often fall into the trap of going at this the other way around. Another effective tactic for us has been office hours, so just a regular but flexible space for shared learning. And in addition to those one-on-one relationships we just talked about, creating space for regular but more targeted conversations and interactions can be really powerful. And that's where regular research office hours come in. The office hours offer a protected space for asking questions and learning together in either one-on-one or smaller group settings. For me, they've always been one of the first things I set up, whether that's as an individual researcher, team of one, part of a broader research team, or as a research leader building a new practice. Usually those are regular scheduled time slots open to anyone in the company wanting to ask questions about a project, get help with scoping or framing a project, maybe identifying the best methodology, get help with recruiting, or maybe they simply want to meet up with a researcher to think through something together. The cadence and format and approach here will vary depending on your organization's need and your operating model, but often weekly to bi-weekly times with options for both drop-in and scheduled slots has worked well for us. Next, we have used guild structures or an insights consortium approach, which acts as a loose but intentional cross-functional learning space. So that's where we've established and facilitated sessions for larger groups like a guild or a center of excellence. It's where we bring together folks from product, marketing, customer success, sales, many other functions that are out there. What we found is that correspondence and public correspondence are an important part of learning relationships and of building learning cultures. Because if we didn't share our conversations more broadly, we would learn in isolation, and we might share our learnings, which is teaching, but we would not be learning with others. And so again, being vulnerable and opening up a space not centered on teaching or sharing an insight, but centered on not yet knowing and learning together. Those consortiums have been regular sessions with a broad group, and they've enabled us to do that glue work at scale. And often that's the work that's expected to be happening, but no one is doing the work or tasked with doing the work. And it's the work that holds disparate efforts together, avoids duplication, offers silo teams a space to move forward and connect the dots. For the consortiums, we've done that successfully, specifically using the lean coffee format to bring together larger groups, but to still keep a collaborative and loose structure. And these have been monthly sessions where we spend time at the beginning of each session capturing and voting on the agenda at the beginning. And then depending on who's there and what's top of mind, we might talk about questions the teams are hearing in their parts of the organization. What knowledge or skill gaps do they see? We might share efforts that are in flight or being planned. And we talk about opportunities for collaboration, or maybe things we've learned that may be relevant to other teams. So now, the interesting thing is the research team is not trying to just share out learning, but instead we perform an organizational acupuncture of sorts. It allows us to focus on unblocking pressure points that help everyone move forward together. And finally, together those efforts provide shared learning spaces. All these tactics can help create the environments to support a culture of learning. Now, there are tons of helpful frameworks, principles, and processes out there. And to be honest, you'll probably learn a bunch more today throughout the day. But this is the work that we can start with right now, because it starts with each one of us. It starts with the individual mindset. It extends through trusted relationships, and it manifests through different rituals and engagement models to support collaboration. So I'll leave you with a proclamation of hope. My hope is for researchers to have a wider and deeper impact through not just the research we do, but how we work together. I hope that we find ways to invite others along on the journey with us. I'd love to see more of us step into roles like that of an innkeeper, a guide, a connector, an enabler of learning cultures. Because when we tie our value only to the research we do, or using that metaphor of the shared journey, if we only focus on creating intermittent moments of passing knowledge from one team to the other, instead of leveraging our skills that we already bring to build spaces for shared learning, I think we might miss a greater opportunity for impact and progress. Lastly, I'll thank all the fellow travelers, too many to name, that I'm continuing to learn from and with, and I'm looking forward to meeting many more of you along the way. Thank you so much to the team at Great Question for hosting us. I hope you all can stick around for the other fantastic speakers and panels. It's a full day of learning ahead of us. And you can find me on most of the social networks under Lena Karina. Like I said, reach out. I'm super excited to collaborate and think through these things together. Thank you so much.